Hey CDA and welcome back to Satisfactory. This time around I am going to do things a little different than normal. But before I do that, I have to talk a little bit about things that we've learned, and while we do that I am going to walk back to our main base. Now the first thing I've learned so far is that things are definitely going to scale up really fast, and whenever you think you have enough production you are going to quickly need a lot more very soon and really quickly on. At the same time, we also kind of need to think small. There is a lot of items that we actually don't need a lot of. Things like the more advanced recipes typically are only used to make a couple of buildings, and we are not going to place down hundreds upon hundreds of those buildings. Typically, even in a facility like we've built over here, there's only like a few dozen things like constructors and assemblers, etc. in here, and that actually doesn't require all that much resources. So we do need to think big, but at the same time we kind of need to think small at the same time. Now thinking small actually tunes into another thing, and that is that things take a long time to build. Like I've said before in the previous episode, that power facility actually took me like 10 hours to build. Now, you might be able to do it a lot faster than I did, and especially if you don't fuss over how it looks too much, you can do it a lot faster. But even if you just build it, like just plop it down, don't care about how it looks, and just place things down, it still takes a lot of time to build all the conveyors, make sure everything is connected, powered up, etc, etc. So, let's say it takes you only 2 hours to build the exact same facility. Then, even then, if you only are making like 5 items per minute, you're still going to have 2 hours times 60 minutes times 5 items is a lot of items built when you come back. So that's what I mean by thinking small. Sometimes you don't need a huge production to have enough resources in order to progress through the game. Now at the same time, combining these two lessons, I actually think that maybe handcrafting is not the worst evil in the world. If you're only going to need like, I don't know, 10 motors, you might as well just craft them by hand in order to kind of boost your production without setting up an entire facility that can make like 10 motors per minute if you're only going to need a few dozen of them for your next facility. You might not even want to set up a facility for those motors, but instead just handcraft them or set up something a lot more simple in order to do the same thing. Now, obviously you will need to automate a lot of things at some point. I'm just starting to think that point might be a lot later than I thought. I was kind of approaching this like Dyson Sphere program. You unlock a new item, that means you kind of want a lot of that new item. The alternative recipes that we've found so far is just the one right now, but still, kind of emphasize that point even more, because the alternative recipes might be more convenient for you to build, but if you already built this giant facility that makes, I don't know, a million screws per minute, I wish I had one of those, then any alternative recipe that you find that makes screws is going to be worthless. So if you find that after you build that facility, you might want to kind of redo that entire facility differently. So that's another reason to kind of think about that before you start building stuff. Now, talking about all of this, and sorry for the long introduction rant, I want to try something new. I want to try kind of a more lean and mean approach for at least one episode, see where that takes us. And that means that I am going to select a little plot of land, and I think we can kind of use this open area. There's nothing of importance there, other than Bob, who is chilling in the water. And let's try something different for a moment. So here we are. We are in that little plot of land that I pointed out before, and what we could actually do now is simply set up maybe like a smelter. Let's go with a constructor. And let's have that, you know, place something like this. Then we can place down a storage unit. Maybe like, let's flip it around actually. It needs to be, this will be the inputs. So we can place that something like this, and then we can have the outputs nicely aligned with everything like this. And then if we put down some belts, I should definitely have pressed sprint before I made that jump. Then what we can actually do, and we probably have to kind of make this a little bit more closely set up, but let's keep it simple for the moment. We can have this input go in over here, we can have this outlet go in over here, and I definitely want to clean this up in a moment, but just to show you the principle, we can set this thing to make, I don't know, for example, biomass from wood. And that means that if I just dump all my wood in here, then of course, assuming I actually power this thing up. There we go. We now have a facility making biomass from wood, and we have a decent amount filling up over here. Now, of course, this is all going to require us to actually manually feed this some resources, but in the case of more complex recipes, we can probably just dump an entire storage container full of resources in here, and this thing is going to be working a long time before it actually runs out of resources. Not like we have to babysit it and come back every few minutes to dump a little bit in here. No, we can just batch a whole amount of stuff in here, and especially when it comes to newer recipes. So for example, we now have the motors that I was talking about earlier. Let's see, where are you, motors? We already have a huge amount of rotors. We have a huge amount of stators that we made in a few episodes ago in the copper facility. So we can pretty much put a full storage unit of inputs next to a motor facility and just have that run without making a whole dedicated facility for that. Now, I don't know, that might be a lot more boring to play, but it's definitely a very efficient way to play, and it's definitely a very efficient way to play if you just need some motors to get to the next stage for something, maybe just to place down a few buildings that actually need those, and just have a stockpile of motors waiting for you. Now, I'm gonna set a few more of these buildings up, and then we're going to have to see if that actually works like I wanted to. And there we go. This is very basic. So we have, I did actually move everything up to the side. I did make it look a little bit more cleaner with the new concrete foundations. I used some color coding to make it a little bit easier to tell what's going in where. But all in all, this looks a lot more clean, and it's very simple, but it works. So we have this biomass facility on the left over here, where we have these green area showing that this is where the leaves go in. We have the actual biofuel coming out over here. We actually have this double facility over here, so we have one constructor making the biomass and then the second constructor making the solid biofuel. It's like a mini factory over here. I put in all the wood that I collected through the last few episodes, which is quite a bit, and just dumped it all in here, and it's actually already been working for a couple of minutes, and as you can see, we have several hundreds of biofuel. This is more than we're ever going to need to kind of power up our chainsaw. We can power up engines for our trucks for a very long time from this, etc. So like I said before, this thing just doing its thing for a little while is actually going to take so much of our plate in terms of setting up an entirely dedicated facility for this, and it also makes me feel silly for doing that so far. Now similarly, I set up a motor facility over here, so we have a assembler over here that is going to make motors. It helps if you actually set the recipe. And then we have these giant storage containers where we can put in some stators, and we can put in some rotors. Where are you? There. And then that should feed into this thing over here. For some reason it's not. Why is it not? I have no idea. For some reason this belt is not connected. Let's fix that. There we go. And we seem to have the same problem on the other side as well. That's very strange. I have no idea why that happened. These storage facilities are actually placed in such a way that we can just click and have a perfectly 90 degree, well 180 degree in total belt over here. So that was a little bit of thought going into the spacing of these storage containers. And yeah, this is now going to make us some motors. I am going to collect some resources because I do want to set up a rubber and plastics facility as well, because the motors, plastics and rubber should allow us to unlock several new things in our technology tree. And yeah, by just keeping it simple, I think we'll be able to progress a lot faster than we've done in the last few episodes. Now, kind of to prove my point, in the time it took to collect all of these resources that we have, that we're going to need to build some basic oil and plastics facility, our little hub over here actually produced enough resources, or at least enough motors, for us to unlock the next tier. So we need 50 motors in order to do that, and we have all of those now without setting up a whole complicated facility to do that. So let's go and unlock that. I think we should have all the resources on us. There we go. And then we're going to have a lot of new interesting items to work with.
Milestone reached. Oil acquisition and refining unlocked. Oil-based products can now be made. The byproducts of oil refinement can be used after further processing, as seen in the refinery.
Okay.
Caution. This is a reminder to minimize the chance of expiration during out-of-base activities.
A chance to minimize expiration. Okay, yeah, interesting. So we have oil up and running now. Well, we don't have it up and running now, but we have it unlocked. So let's see, what did we just unlock? Quite a few things apparently. So we have plastic, which is made from crude oil apparently, but we also have already an alternate recipe, and that is making it from polymer resin as well as water. Okay, that's interesting. So polymer resin is made from what? Oh, it's made from crude oil. So you can make crude oil into fuel and resin, and then you can make that resin back into plastic and so with water combine the resin and make plastic, or you can just make the plastic straight up from the crude oil, and then we have some heavy oil residue. And then what do we do with that? Apparently we can use that to make fuel. Okay. Let me think about it for a moment. So we can either go oil into fuel, into resin, into plastic. And apparently the same holds for rubber. It's kind of the same thing happening over here. So oil into rubber and residue, and then resin plus water into rubber. Okay, so we can either do that one, or we can do the whole make fuel, and then have the resin being turned into plastic. That's actually interesting. So one way or another, we can make rubber, plastic, and fuel. But the question is, do we want to use the heavy oil residue as a byproduct and make that into fuel, or do we want the resin as a byproduct and make that into plastic and rubber? Now, the latter option, if I look at the ratios, is definitely going to get us a lot less rubber and plastic than the first option, and the first option being like the main recipe. And that recipe is actually probably going to get us a lot less fuel. Although it doesn't look too bad, because we have 3 into 1 residue, and then we have rubber into 3 into 2 residue. And in order to make... So that's basically going to give us... What is it? 3 per what? It's 40 per minute. Let's see, 20 per minute. So yeah, so the ratios are there. So basically it's half the fuel production that we would get normally by the looks of it. Although, to be honest, it's not that bad. The thing is, I don't actually have a use for fuel at the moment, but I do have a use for plastic and rubber. So I'm inclined to go for the main recipe and make the heavy oil residue into fuel, and then see where that takes us, because we'll be able to stock up a lot of fuel before we get to a point where we're going to need it, just looking at the actual production ratios, because these production ratios are actually pretty good. It's 20 per minute, so this is definitely one of the faster production things. Now the real question is, where are we going to find oil? We're going to have to make a shopping list as well to make sure we have enough resources, because from what I remember, we have oil nowhere near here. We might have oil somewhere up here though, so it's definitely going to be a long track. We want to make sure we have all the resources, and yeah, let's just go do some exploration. Okay, I went all the way up to the coast over here, and found some oil in this general area. There seems to be a lot of oil over there, actually. And to be honest, I'm really happy I didn't install any flying mods or anything like that. I was kind of thinking about doing that, honestly, because the building, in terms of building up, was getting a little bit annoying, especially with the larger builds that I made for the coal power. But I didn't do that, and exploring by land is definitely very different from exploring by air, because that would trivialize that a lot. There were some quite nice sights. There were also a lot of spiders, and apparently a radioactive island somewhere over here. But now I've actually found a few interesting things. So there is one of those pods over here, but also, what the hell is this creature over here? There is this giant sea monster. Well, to be honest, it looks like one of those larger versions of the spitters. This one, for now, seems fairly friendly. I'm not sure if it's going to be unfriendly any moment now. But yeah, this looks definitely very scary. But as long as it leaves me alone, I don't see any issue to deal with it. Now apparently the drop pod over here actually lets me easily collect this. I think we can leave out some of these plates and get this. So it's interesting that these drop pods seem to require different things. This apparently doesn't require anything. While some of them need power, and I actually already found another one as well that required some random materials. Now we have some circuit boards over here that we actually don't have space for, that we need to start thinking about as well. We'll actually be unlocking those really soon as well. But let's continue on to our... Are you getting angry at me now? You were making a lot of noise, but you're not actually shooting at me, so that works for me. But yeah, let's continue on to the actual oil. Look everyone, we found oil over there, and we actually have more oil in the corner over here, and the island even comes with its own bar. So I am already loving this island, and yes, it is an island. We actually came from the beach over there. The space elevator is a very convenient landmark to make sure we know where we are at all times. I actually think in the distance is that our own main base that we can see over there. Oh, actually it's not, it's just a very strange plant. Okay, anyway, what we want to do is build some oil over here. Now I'm actually inclined to keep this simple as well in the spirit of this episode, so we're going to build a little mini facility over here that is just going to be producing some plastic, some rubber, and some fuel. And we are definitely going to want to get into one of these oil facilities as well. Now there's actually 1, 2, I think 3 oil patches on this island. There's oil over there as well. At least I think it's oil. So to be honest, we have a lot of oil here to work with. I just don't think that there's much point in setting up a major oil facility at this point in the game. Like I said before, it's really easy to kind of overproduce things without any specific purpose. So let's not do that and keep it small. Okay, so I made a little platform, and once again I really like these new concrete foundations. So it's extruding kind of from the hill. It's kind of floating in the air, but we can fix that in a moment. Yeah, I think this should be a very nice little place to start building an oil facility. Now, let's see. We are going to need some refineries in order to make fluids into stuff. And let's actually look at the recipe. So let's just place down 1. I think this is as good a place as any. This is a pretty big facility, but we have plenty of space here. Now let's see, we will be able to make some plastic. I do want to use the main recipe. And let's look at the ratio. So this is 30 oil per minute. We are going to get 20 plastic out of that and 10 residue. And then we have, not this one, I want to use this one, yes. This is going to give us 20 per minute, 20 per minute. So that's going to give us a total of 20 rubber, 20 plastic, and 30 oil residue, if I did my math correctly, per minute, assuming we have those two, 1 refinery for each. And then when we look at fuel, we need 60 per minute in order to make 40 per minute. So if I do the math correctly, I'm doing it from the top of my head now, so this might be wrong, but it's probably not. I think for every 2 plastic facilities and 2 rubber facilities, we should have yeah, that should give us exactly 60. Does that actually give us 60? Yeah, I do think that actually gives us a total of 60 heavy oil residue per minute. So that should be enough to fuel one of these fuel refineries. So it's basically going to be sets of 5 to have a perfect ratio going on. Now, when we put down a oil thingy, which is oil extractor. Now we are going to place it on foundations. This is just to actually test how fast the production is. That's actually going to give us 120 per minute. Now, this was actually going to need 30 per minute. So I think we can actually make a perfect ratio of... this is the residue, so hold on. Plastic, 30 per minute. So if we have 2 of these, that's 60 per minute. We have 2 rubber as well. That was again 30 per minute, so that's 60. So those 4 facilities together, 2 rubber, 2 plastic, it's going to take exactly 120 oil per minute. So that's exactly what this is going to be producing. And then we have exactly 1 fuel facility in order to process the byproducts, and then we should be good to go, I believe. So let's go set that up. There we go, pretty straightforward. So we have the oil coming in from the back. Oh, there we go. We have the oil coming in from the back. It's just one simple pipeline being split into these 4 facilities over here. We actually have no need for anything to feed in from this second port. Then we have the residue coming out. That's going to go all the way over here into the refinery over here that is flipped around. That's going to be producing the fuel, and then that's going to feed into these buffers. Now I place down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those. That's going to store up, I believe, something like 3,000 cubic meters of fuel. Not entirely sure how much we are going to need, but this is going to be producing fuel without us having anything to do with that. So this whole fuel setup is mainly to make sure that we don't back up our facility too soon, because we are going to need plastic and rubber. And whenever we come back here to pick some up, we can always just flush this system and make sure we can restock that or whatever in case it's backed up. But it should be running for quite a while, because after all we have only this single facility running here. It's only going to make 40 per minute, so it's going to be able to run for quite a while. At least enough for us to produce quite a bit of plastic and rubber. Now, when it comes to that, as you can see, I have a sink over here because I do think that we're probably going to be overproducing a few things anyway. Now, the sink doesn't actually have a liquids input, so I can't actually put in the oil, the fuel. Otherwise, I would have done that as well. But I do have the smart splitters over here. Now, what I'm going to do with that, and I do have to check the orientation. So this is the orientation that it's referring to in the menu. In the center, everything is just going to go through. We don't have anything on the left, but on the right, we're going to set this to overflow. I do think that this is a little bit bugged. It won't actually let anything through unless you actually select the outputs, even if it's just selecting the same output that was already there. And by doing this, this will mean that all our, in this case, rubber will actually go into this storage facility initially. If this storage facility ever gets completely full, all the other rubber that we are producing is actually going into this sink. Now, I do think that I should have set up a lot of my other facilities like this as well to always have some sort of overflow. Now, of course, we didn't actually have the smart splitters until recently, so doing this with normal splitters would be really annoying. But yeah, this is just a way to make sure this facility is always working, if it wasn't for the fact that this fuel is going to back up at some point as well. But that's a non-issue for the moment. What is an issue for the moment is that the fact that we don't actually have any power here. We actually don't have those fuel plants unlocked that we saw earlier, so we can't actually use this fuel to power things up. Which means that we are going to have to bring power from elsewhere. Now, we could set up a, I don't know, biomass facility or something like that over here. That is probably the most convenient way to do this initially. If you just think like, okay, I just need some rubber, I just need some plastics, let's get this thing working. There are plenty of trees and things like that around to get yourself a lot of biofuel. Set up a very simple biofuel facility and then just take it from there. But what we are actually going to do is I'm going to see if I can drag my power poles all the way back to my main grid. Now that's going to be a lot of fun, especially with all the hostile enemies running around. But yeah, let's do some more exploring. Okay guys, this is the best thing ever. I went exploring and I went into a cave thinking, well, this seems to be the quickest way to my quartz facility. We have power over here that's already connected here, so I thought this was going to be quick. Well, it turns out it's probably not going to be quick at all, because actually getting out of this cave is going to be a problem. But this cave itself is really, really cute. There are so many doggos in here. We have 1, 2. Actually, let's speed up my movement a little bit. There were, I think, like 5 doggos in here somewhere. There's a couple of them in the back, I believe, as well. There's a couple of them down here. I seem to have lost all of them. I hope I didn't drive them off a cliff once again. I've been doing that before, as you know. There we go. There's some more doggos. As you can see, I have this whole power situation going over there. But, yeah, there's a lot of doggos here. I have no way to actually tame the doggos because it's still bugged. And it's breaking my heart because I have not ever tamed a doggo in my entire Satisfactory career so far. There also seems to be junk on the floor here, along with some computers. So that's convenient to pick up. I didn't actually find a drop pod to go along with this junk. Usually if you have this junk on the floor, there's a drop pod somewhere. It might be up here, I don't know. But let's continue on because I still have a lot of ground to cover before we reach any of our main power facility connections. And as you can see, there's a lot of plants over here, so we have a long way to go. Well, this is definitely not the most efficient way to get your power anywhere. As you can see, I've brought the power up all the way from this cave, up and up and up and up, using some stairs. Like I said, I have not installed any flying mods, although exploring this cave kind of made me wish I did to some extent. We also have some more doggos over here, so for some reason this is like the dog central cave, I don't know, but at least we're out in the open once again and we can continue on exploring. But I spent I don't know how much time in this cave just exploring. To be honest, it was really fun to some extent, kind of exploring. We found a lot of slugs along the way. I wish I could also have tamed the doggos, like I said, but maybe later. And it's kind of just cool just looking around the cave. But it's definitely not the most efficient way to get your power anywhere. So next time I probably should have gone just straight back across the beach and just do it that way. But anyway, this works. Well, after me taking the most complicated way through this cave over here and trying to get to the quartz, it actually turns out that there was a lot more convenient and easy way to get there through just an open area ramp over here that leads right to the beach, right to the quartz that would not have required me to build 5 million bridges in order to get up from the cave. Anyway, I guess that's what exploring is. We are now back at the base. Bob has apparently decided to join us in our base itself. That's interesting. I haven't seen him actually coming up on my foundations a lot so far. Also have the giant birds flying over. And I did visit my my fuel and rubber and plastic facility. Brought back quite a bit of stuff actually, as you can see. This was just from a matter of a few minutes production. Now, I did actually forget one single power pole at the start. I actually started building power poles from my plastics facility all the way to the quartz in the end, only to go back and find out it wasn't actually already working because I didn't actually connect the power from the facility itself to the first power pole. So of course that was a matter of just fixing it when I got there, but it would have been more convenient to actually have that producing while I was making my way back in order to be even more efficient. But now we do have a lot of plastic and rubber, and we can start unlocking a couple of stuff. We are also back home and the motor facility has been running. As you can see, it is actually still running, so that's just to show you how long it actually takes for that whole thing to be depleted, but it also means we have a few hundred, almost 1,000 motors already up and running without building a complex facility to do that. Now this is more motors than I know what to do with at the moment, but it did take me a few hours to get to this point, so if you sit around waiting for these motors, that seems like a very long time. But like I said, I was just building some oil, some plastic, I was exploring a little bit. I did find quite a few more hard drives, as you can see. There were quite a few of those drop pods along the way. So there was definitely a benefit to doing that exploring, and in the meanwhile this was just producing. So I do think definitely this is an efficient way to approach the game. Now let's see what we can actually unlock. Now, back at the hub, we can actually see that we now have all the resources to unlock the manufacturer and everything that comes along with that. We also have everything but the heavy modular frames, but we can easily just handcraft 25 of these, or just make a very simple setup, similar to what we've done with the motors, and make a couple of those as well. We do need to manufacture in order to do that, because we need, I think, 4 different items to make these. Yep, as you can see from the recipe. So we could just place down one manufacturer, have those feed those with these 4 different items that we are actually already producing, and make some of those and unlock this. We also have everything we need for the gas mask, except for the fabric actually, but we do have those plants all around, so we can easily make some of these fabrics. In terms of tier 6, we would need some computers. Now similarly, we need only 100, so placing down one more manufacturer to produce some of those should unlock all of that, and I could go on like that. But to be honest, even though that is definitely an efficient way to approach the game, the idea of just building like a couple of more facilities like this over here, and then just having a single constructor doing this and a single manufacturer doing that, and I'm feeding it all by hand, just sounds really boring. I have to admit, I already started building that out a little bit in a different save, and I just found myself getting bored really quick. Now, once again, I do want to point out that it's definitely an efficient way to approach the game. There's no arguing with the fact that I now have hundreds of these motors waiting, have a couple of things unlocked. I actually have plastic and rubber now unlocked as well without building a pretty facility. It's definitely a lot quicker to progress, but it's just not as much fun. It's not as satisfying, and the game is satisfactory after all. Are you actually flying right through my space elevator? I hadn't actually noticed that so far, but that definitely means I need to place this somewhere else at some point, because I don't want my creatures to clip my buildings. Anyway, sorry for getting distracted there. I was on a rant about this approach. I will definitely go back to just making better builds, larger builds, more complex builds, in order to make everything automated rather than like pursuing this particular style of playthrough. But once again, it does definitely work, and to be honest, especially in the early game, I think it might actually be a lot quicker way to kind of progress through the earlier tiers a little bit faster without having to completely backtrack to your previous facilities because you unlocked stuff like Mark II miners and things like that. But yeah, for now, this was a very fun experiment, at least, to try out something different for a change. We do now have a lot of exploring done, we do have oil. We should probably put that on the map at some point as well. But having said all of that, I do think that I want to take, once again, a different approach for the next episode. And in the next episode, I want to start kind of consolidating our small empire that we have been starting to build over here. Right now, we have our production kind of all over the place. We have quartz over here, we have oil over there, we have the sulfur, coal, etc. over here, we have the copper facility over here, we have the steel facility over here as well, etc, etc. So we have things all over the place, but even if you want to go for an approach like this, when you're kind of like just keeping things simple and making the more complex items in a straightforward manner, even then I think it would be really annoying to get around. But more about that rant in the next episode. For now, I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comments, actually. Do you use setups like this a lot in your playthroughs, or just do you automate everything from the get-go, or how does your playstyle differ from what I've been showing you so far compared to basically what I've been doing? Let me know in the comments. I'm actually really interested to see how you guys play this game. And while I say that, I hope you enjoy this one, and I will catch you in the next one.